I was just turning into my driveway after another long shift when I spotted the police cruiser parked beside the community pond. My stomach twisted. In Oakwood Heights, a cop car usually meant one thing. Karen Peton had found her next victim. Sure enough, as I hurried toward the pond, I could already hear her piercing voice cutting through the peaceful afternoon air like a siren of doom. There on the bench, as calm as ever, sat Walter Garrison, 78 years old, a Vietnam vet and the longest-standing resident of our neighborhood. His weathered hands gripped his fishing pole steadily, unfazed by the chaos unraveling behind him. Behind Walter stood Karen, arms crossed, lips curled with smug authority. She wore her HOA president badge like it was a sheriff's star, pressed slacks, sharp blazer, and her signature blonde bob bouncing with every furious gesture. And there she was, wagging papers at the young officer like she was staging a courtroom drama. But what unfolded next would cost the HOA $2 million in waterfront property, and Karen everything she thought she controlled. Let me rewind. Walter moved into Oakwood Heights in 1992, back when this was just farmland, dirt roads, and the pond wasn't a luxury. It was a neighbor's retreat. His modest ranch-style home sat on 3 acres, the pond forming the eastern edge. Every morning for over 3 decades, Walter would walk down with his thermos of coffee and tackle box and fish in peace. Karen? She moved in 2 years ago, straight into a massive McMansion atop Hillrest Drive. In under 6 months, she had clawed her way onto the HOA board. Within a year, she declared herself president. And her reign? Tyrannical. She imposed mailbox inspections, a mandatory beige-only paint palette, landscaping citations, and now, her latest crusade, the pond. She labeled it an exclusive HOA amenity, slapped a $50 monthly permit fee, and claimed it required written approval. That Saturday, Walter, unaware or simply unbothered, strolled down to his usual spot around 7 a.m. Same chair. Same rod. Karen appeared not long after, stomping down the gravel path like a district attorney in heels. Despite it being Saturday, she wore her usual power suit and was already yelling. Effective immediately, this pond is HOA regulated. She barked, holding a manila folder full of HOA bylaws like they were biblical scripture. Walter didn't even flinch, just smiled, nodded, and cast another line. That only made her angrier. She raised her voice. Fritten finis. Demanded he leave. Well, he didn't. She called 911. I heard all of it from Janet, my neighbor, who was walking her beagle nearby. She said Karen stood towering over Walter, shrieking HOA policies like a dictator reading a manifesto. When Walter still refused to leave, she demanded the police come and have him trespassed. That's when I ran over, and the scene was something out of a sitcom. Walter sat fishing peacefully, Karen pacing and furious, and a very confused officer trying to make sense of it all. By then, half the neighborhood had gathered, forming a silent semicircle around the pond. Cameras out, phones recording. The officer, young and clearly new to this, tried to mediate. He politely asked Walter if he lived in the neighborhood. Walter nodded, pointed to his house just beyond the trees. Karen interrupted, waving her file and rattling off HOA jargon, emphasizing how the $2 million pond was HOA controlled. She claimed she had documentation proving ownership and handed it to the officer like she was handing over a court order. The officer furrowed his brow and turned to Walter, asking if he had anything on record. Walter reached into his tackle box, pulled out a small envelope, and handed over a deed from 1992. The officer studied it and made a phone call to the county clerk. We all stood still. The only sound was the soft hum of Walter's fishing reel. Karen, arms crossed, kept smirking at the crowd as if to say, just wait till they arrest him. 3 minutes later, the officer hung up, and everything changed. According to county records, he said, the pond and a 50-foot buffer zone around it were never officially transferred to the HOA. It's public trust land, and Mr. Garrison holds a deeded easement to access it. Karen's expression cracked like glass. She stumbled, blinked, tried to argue. But it was too late. Word spread fast. Phones came out. Neighbors pulled up the HOA site, looked at the permit fees they'd been forced to pay. Someone yelled, "Are we getting refunds?" Another asked, "Can they even fine us now?" The officer stepped aside as county officials soon arrived. They confirmed the pond wasn't legally HOA property. Even worse, the HOA had no rights to enforce access rules or collect fees. A county official named Patricia Holloway issued a cease and desist on the spot. All pond enforcement was to be stopped, all fees refunded, and a full audit of the HOA's property claims was now underway. Karen's carefully built empire began to collapse. That night, an emergency HOA board meeting turned into a public reckoning. 3 board members resigned immediately, calling Karen's actions gross negligence. The remaining members hired a lawyer. His findings were brutal. Over $2 million in devalued community assets, $800,000 in potential fines and refunds, unauthorized legal threats, and worse, fraudulent loan applications. Turns out, Karen had used the pond as collateral for an HOA loan, despite not owning it. She'd also collected over $15,000 in permit fees, sent out threatening cease and desist letters, and falsely listed the pond as a secured community asset on HOA documents. When the local news got wind of it, the headline exploded. HOA president calls police on elderly veteran, loses $2 million asset. And yes, Walter's a Vietnam vet. Something Karen could have known if she'd ever bothered to talk to him instead of bulldozing over him. Then came the special community meeting. The clubhouse was packed. Every resident had a story. How Karen had fined a widow $500 for painting her mailbox the wrong beige. How she threatened a disabled vet over a wheelchair ramp. Every voice in that room spoke not just of the pond, but years of oppression under her rule. The first vote was swift. Remove Karen from the board. Result, 212 to 3. She stood motionless at the podium, lips trembling. Then came the second vote. Hold her personally liable. Result, 198 to 17. The HOA's attorney stood and explained. Karen could face up to $300,000 in civil damages, with the state attorney general investigating her for real estate fraud, punishable by up to $50,000 in fines and 5 years in prison. Karen grabbed her folder, heels clacking across the clubhouse floor, and ran sobbing to her Mercedes. And Walter? He stayed by the pond, fishing rod in hand. Calm, steady, like he'd always known this day would come.